Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Soul-u-tions podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about what is next for you. All right, I'll see you on the other side of the intro. Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find Soul-u-tions.
The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
As a life coach, clients come to me for two reasons, I would say mainly. One, they're having a challenging time in their life and they need some help navigating their challenge. I call this the life preserver client. They need a bit of a life raft in their life. And so they come to me to help them navigate those times. The other reason why people come to work with a life coach is they're at a crossroads in their life. They're looking forward in their life and they're wondering, what is next? And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So if you're one of those people who is forward looking and who's wondering, what is next for me in my life, then this one is for you. I remember when I first started working with a coach, I was in my mid-30s and I was wondering, what is next for me? I had accomplished a lot of things professionally. At that point, I was a partner in a law firm. I was married, had a beautiful home. I had 3 beautiful children. And yet, I wasn't 100% fulfilled. I felt like something had shifted within me, and that thing that I thought that I wanted, having achieved it, there was something else that I wanted for me. And it was something that my husband, and I've shared this before, was very wise on. And he said, "Tara, I can't help you with what that thing is for you, but I will help support you in your desire to find that thing." I think this is a real important question for anyone and everyone to answer in your life, is what is next for you? And especially at the beginning of the year, this is a fantastic time to ask this question. Truly, it's a fantastic time to ask this question any time of year, but I happen to be recording this podcast episode in January. And when thinking about it, especially in the winter months, I always think about a gardener or a farmer. The winter months are a time of really short days, long nights, and in our part of the world, it's cold. And gardeners look through seed catalogs at this time of year. They begin to dream forward about their garden that they're going to plant in the spring and the produce that garden is going to produce in the summer and into the fall. And so when you're thinking about a seed catalog, you think, oh yes, I planted that last year. I want more of that this year, or I don't want as much of that this year. I want something different. And you begin to go through the catalog. Well, for people, we don't really have a seed catalog of what is next for you. But we do have a sense of curiosity that we can follow and use as a guide and open our eyes to things that other people are doing. So you might think, like, I remember when I turned 50, I was like, what is next for me at 50? And what was next for me at 50 was, I'm like, I want to run a marathon. That was a pretty kind of a quick thing. I was running a mile at the time, and someone asked me to run the Chicago Marathon with them in 14 weeks. And so I was like, okay, this is next for me. I'm going to learn how to run a marathon in the next 14 weeks. But then I also thought, I'd love to learn how to play the fiddle, which is the violin for those of you who want to know. We just call it a fiddle in the type of music that I play. And that one has been a longer term what is next for me. The reason why I wanted to learn how to play the fiddle is that my husband is an amazing guitar player, and the types of music that he plays, it sounds great with a fiddle. And so I was thinking about it in terms of how much I enjoy music, how much I enjoy being with him, and how I wanted to be more of a participant in the music making in our household than just an audience member. And the other thing that I decided I wanted to do was learn how to play golf. These were all on the personal front of things, of what I wanted to do. At that point, turning 50, thinking about the second half of my life, and thinking about my nest being empty. I also had professional things that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to take my life coaching business to the next level. I knew that I wanted to really create a vibrant membership for women, this idea of a red tent where women of all generations could come and gather and talk about all the things that nobody ever tells you to expect in life. I wanted it to be a place where there were no secrets and where we totally dissolved any feelings around shame for where you were in your life. And that's important because sometimes when we're thinking about what's next for us, automatically this idea of, I thought I would be someplace different than I am now, accompanied by a sense of shame arises. And if that is you, I want to tell you that is 100% normal, 100% normal. And I want to encourage you, however, to put that sense of shame aside, to understand why you are where you are, why you aren't where you thought you would be right now, and to give yourself a lot of compassion to reevaluate as to whether that original place you wanted to be is still someplace you want to go, or do you want to try something totally different? So when I decided I really wanted to make a go at being a life coach, I gave up a 25-year law practice in order to do this new thing that I wanted to do for me. I had become a lawyer at the encouragement of my parents. It's a great profession. I loved it, but it wasn't something that I felt like just I was born to do. And yet I felt like there was something that I was born to do. And the more that I coached, the more I felt like that was a place where I could pour in my talents. And when you're thinking about what is next for you, I want you to lean into those places that, one, we talked about, you might be curious about, but also what comes easy to you? What brings you joy? And if you would simply say, what's next for me is a little more of this thing that brings me joy. Now, if you really want to make a big leap, like what I did from the practice of law to life coaching, then that required for me this idea of, while I'm going to do this for me, I'm going to become a life coach for me. I also have a family, and my the income that I produce is important to my family. So I made a deal with myself. I'm going to make the shift This what's next for me is going to be a profession that I choose, that I really want to choose, that I feel aligned with. But here's the deal. I'm going to have to figure out a way to make as much money, if not more, than I was going to make in being a partner in a law firm. And so that presented an entirely different set of challenges and skill sets that I had to learn, and a huge investment of time and money in order to be able to do that. But I set goals for myself. I'm like, okay, first I'm going to master being a coach. Then I'm going to learn how to make money. Then I'm going to learn how to market. Then I'm going to learn how to do this. It required a lot of things, but it was worth it to me because all of that has been part of this second half of my life and this next chapter. So while I had those fun things to do, from playing the fiddle, running a marathon, and learning to play golf, I also had this professional contribution that I wanted to make in my life. And I also knew that I wanted to be available to shepherd my children into their young adulthood through college, to be available for my parents, and really to wonder what the next stage of my marriage was going to be like. Those are all big what's next for you things, but they all have to be chunked down into smaller things. And so here I am now, coming up on 57, and those were all the what's next for me things at 50 that I set for myself. And I'm doing really well at a lot of them, but some have had to fall by, on the, I've had to put them aside, or I did lose my appetite for pursuing them. Both the fiddle and golf I waned on those feelings, and I've had to ask myself again, I just let that be okay. I let it be okay that I wanted those things to be next for me, and they were next and important for about a year and a half. And then I haven't done anything with them in several years now. So now the question is, what do I want to do next with those things? Do I want to say, yep, I tried it, I want to move on to something else, or do I want to take those to the next level? So, for instance, in my golf game, what was next for me was joining a group of women. I love to tell my family I was recruited by the LPGA Tour. It's really just the Ladies Golf Association of my own club, but I'm like, they wanted me to be on the tour. And I joined it back in September, only to find out that I needed a handicap in order to participate in the tournaments. And I don't have a handicap. So what's next for me now is to get a handicap in golf. And that involved me going to talk to the pros and talking to some of the women in the group and saying, how do you go about getting a handicap? I had no idea how you went about getting a handicap, even though I've been following my kids around junior golf and college golf all these years. I never really kind of understood the nuts and bolts of really getting a handicap. And I tell you what, I love to hit a ball, pick it up, drop it, and I love to play with everybody, but I'm not so into hitting the ball from tee to green every shot. And guess what? That's what you need to do to get a handicap. So what's next for me is a little bit of mapping out over the course of the next 12 months enough holes, stringing them together to get a handicap so that then I can really go on the LPGA Tour in the future. So when I'm asking you, when you're thinking about what's next for you, go with that big picture thing, that thing that lights you up. And then just follow your curiosity. follow your joy with it for a while. Like I did that with both the fiddle and golf. I just followed my joy with it for a while. And then, you know what? I set it aside for a while too, while I like poured myself into other things. And my family was the number one thing that I poured myself into, getting these kids into college and getting them secure and launching someone into the world and being able to be present with my parents, especially as they're aging. And after my father's stroke, those were some things that I really wanted to pour myself and my time into, as well as my business, which involves like this podcast that I've been working on. This is my 3rd year now working with the guys at Get Up Productions. And the thing I want you to walk away from today's podcast is, God willing, life is long. Life is long. You are not behind in whatever it is that you want to do. You live in the most exciting time in the history of humanity. You have the internet. You have AI. You have this amazing phone in your hand that can do all these amazing things. You live in a truly exciting time of connection and of ideas and of information. So much is available to you. The price of entry is so low. You can do whatever you want to do, and there are so many avenues to figure out how to do it for yourself. But you do need to spend some time, like giving yourself an opportunity to try things on and fail, to try something else and fail again, to evaluate. You know, it's my favorite thing to share with everybody to do. Remember to look at what's working, what's not, what are you going to do differently? I think so many of us are conditioned because of school and grades and the pressure that you can't fail, that we think we have to get it right out of the gates. And I see this tripping so many people up, that if they can't figure out what's next for them, they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Because there's this perfectionist thing like, I should know what's next for me, or I don't know what's next for me, and I guess I'll just keep doing this thing. You have to just decide to do something. I mean, truly, let it be outlandish or let it be super small. I tell you one thing that I did over this last 8 months that's truly been a game changer for me. So one of the things I'm focused on these days is longevity, and I'm thinking very much about my 80 and 90-year-old self. And that's because the research is very clear that the relationships that you have in your 50s, that your diet that you have in your 50s, that your exercise, all of these things that you're doing in your 50s really contribute to your health and well-being in your 80s. So one thing was this crazy thing I saw on Instagram called the old man balancing test. And it's this test where you stand on one foot and you put your shoe and your sock on the other foot while you're balancing on one foot. Well, I used to be a ballerina, so balancing was pretty easy for me. I was like, I'll give that a try. Y'all, I was just falling all over the place. And I thought, what's next for me is for the rest of my life, I'm going to put my tennis shoes on using the old man balancing test, using that as my new methodology for putting my shoes and socks on. And I've been doing that for 9 months. And it's great. And I think about myself in my future at 80 and 90 every time I do it. And every time I think that I don't have time to do it that way, I pause and I say, but I don't have time not to do it that way either. I would be cheating my 80 to 90-year-old self out of that. So I want you to just pick something. What is next for you? What is next for you? And then I want you to be willing to fail at it. Be willing to fall down. Be willing to put it aside after a while, right? Be willing to learn what else you need to learn in order to do it. So maybe what's next for you is, I know, the last podcast I recorded. Maybe it's having easy money conversations with your partner. That could be what's next for you. Maybe it is starting a podcast. Maybe that's what's next for you. Just start. Call these cute guys at Get Up Productions. They'll get you all suited up for that. Charles is always looking for someone else to produce over here. That would be fun. Just follow your sense of curiosity. I'll leave with one of these last things because this what's next for you could be super simple. With my dad. So during COVID, Phil Mickelson, who was, everybody loved him back in 2020. Not so much anymore since all the live golf and other things have happened. But he had this thing called fireside chats. And I thought, this would be something fun to do with my dad, is that I'll start to record some fireside chats with him and then I'll post them on my Instagram. I mean, that's a pretty easy what's next for you thing, but it was something in my relationship with my dad. We loved to have conversations together. He was so funny, a wealth of information, and we loved to tease each other. And we both were a couple of hams when it came to performing. So we did some of these fireside chats. Fast forward, my father passed away last week, and my niece was really sad and down. She goes, I don't know if I'll ever hear Pat's voice again. And she started going through Instagram, and she ran across a fireside chat with me and Pat. And she sent it to her mom, and she goes, oh my gosh, here's Pat in this fireside chat. It was so simple. I asked him about his day. He told me this funny story of taking a walk around the pond with my mom and how he thought that she was inviting him to, flirt with him and maybe to go back to the house and have a little fun. And they sat on this bench, and it was the dearest, sweetest thing. And all of that was born out of, what might be next for me? What might be a fun next thing to do with Pat? We'd always talked about writing a book together. We used to, practice law together. And those things that we weren't going to ever practice law together again. The writing the book thing together felt like that opportunity, that door had closed for us. But a couple of fireside chats that we could do on a regular basis on Instagram, that felt like something really cool. And there are about 5 or 6 of them. And now my family was looking at them over the weekend while everybody was in town, and it's bringing them joy, and it's bringing my mother joy. So, you never know what's next for you. And you never know what it might mean to someone else down the road. And so just do it. If you're feeling it inside of you, it's enough that you just want to do something for fun. And you never know what the fact that you followed that question, what is next for you, how that will pay off for someone else in the future. Who would have known that a silly fireside chat between me and Pat to just entertain ourselves during COVID would end up being something that was meaningful to other members of my family in a time where where all anybody ever wanted was just to hear my father's voice again and the way he told a story again. And this kind of reminds me of this quote from Marianne Williamson in her book, A Return of Love. And it says something to the effect of, it's not really the fear of failure that keeps us, that we're more afraid of our light than of our dark. Who are you not to follow your own path? Who are you to deny the rest of the world what it is that just wants to be brought to the world, but through you to the world? I'll have to look up that quote to give it to you better, but that's the gist of it. And I think that falls in the category of, as Byron Katie says, there are three businesses. There's my business, there's your business, and there's God's business. And if I'm following my business, that's my only job, is to do what is my business to do, and to leave the rest up to others and to God. And so if you are, if you want to do something, do it. Stick with the question, what's next for you? And stay engaged in your life. And don't be afraid for it to be too small. And don't be afraid to chunk it down if it's really big. You're going to need a combination of both throughout your life. And you're also never going to know who. We talk a lot about modeling on this podcast and what the next generation is going to see. You never know who you may be granting permission to do something in their life. So I'm going to end our podcast right there. Almost 10 minutes to spare on Charles's memory card here. But really spend some time on a walk thinking about what is next for you. And maybe in your conversations with other people, instead of saying, "How you doing?" you could say, "What's next for you?" And get people talking about this. That would be kind of cool in and of itself, if what's next for you is just to survey other people about what is next for them. But I'd love for you to let me know what is next for you if you make a decision. You can always reach me. I'm at Tara@TaraSimkins.com. That's SIMKINS, no P. I love to hear what's next for you. You can follow me on the socials at Soul-u-tions Labs on Instagram, and send me a DM. Let me know that you listened to the podcast, what you thought about it, and what is next for you. Oh, and while we're talking about the podcast and how you thought about it, I would love a review. If you could just take a moment and review this podcast, that would be fantastic. Okay, until next time, my friends, what's next for you, I hope, is leaving me a good review, and then Apple or Spotify or whomever the podcast people will refer it to someone else. And we'll talk again soon.
'Cause I ain't done living the life I'm meant to lead. And I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibility.